You're listening to Community Forum on KCCC 930 AM, sponsored by Eddy County, honoring God, country, and family, thriving with industry since 1889.
My name's Johnny Chandler. I'm the owner of KCCC 930 AM and the host of Community Forum. And with me this month is Paul Gessing. Paul Gessing is the president of the Rio Grande Foundation. He's a regular. Welcome back. How's it going?
Doing well, Johnny. Good to be back with you.
All right. So I think the largest topic, I think the most noteworthy thing with your name associated with it is going to be the Albuquerque Journal editorial. That was obviously you put everything on airsenchantment.com as well, so we can find it there. But it's always nice when the state newspaper of record or one of them picks up your editorial. So why don't you tell us a little bit about what it was and then what inspired you to write it?
Yeah, pretty simple. Of course, we had the Democratic National Convention just a few weeks ago, and Kamala Harris has been very studious, you could say strategic, in her approach with the media and coming up with policy positions. Mostly, she has not come up with defined policy positions, or she's flip-flopped to the point where she's adopted numerous Trump policy positions. So I had an epiphany. I noticed that Michelle Lujan Grisham, our governor, had spoken at her convention in a primetime slot. And I felt like, one of the things about life is that you are often judged appropriately so by the people you surround yourself with. And I think Michelle Lujan Grisham being invited to speak at the DNC should be a huge impediment to Kamala Harris in her bid to be elected, because if Trump has somebody who says and does a lot of bad things, he will be judged by that. I think vice versa. It's the only way to go. And most New Mexicans are at least passingly familiar with Michelle Lujan Grisham's record. But so I think it's worth noting that we're 50th or 52nd in education. Kids count. The national report finds New Mexico dead last. And we have the worst crime in the country, all under Michelle Lujan Grisham's watch. And despite all of that money that we've had to spend, she summarily suspended the Second Amendment right to keep and bear arms in Bernalillo County last year, which should give anybody pause in this presidential election. If the governor of a state is willing to blatantly disregard the U.S. Constitution, what does that mean for the candidate for president who is inviting them to speak on a national stage? I mean, even David Hogg, anti-gun activist, said this is a bridge too far.
Are we still, real quickly, are we still under a public health emergency? Was that officially lifted? I mean, it's been so long that I don't think anybody pays attention.
Yeah, so last time I checked, we were still under a crime public emergency. I haven't gone back and checked, thankfully, because, of course, the Second Amendment is right out there in the open in the U.S. Constitution. Judges quickly overturned her ability to ban the right of people to carry guns in Bernalillo County and that county. But there's still other public health emergencies that aren't quite so impactful. Of course, COVID, she shut down the state, kept kids out of the classroom for more than a year. She's, one of the things that we're going to talk about, Kamala Harris's position on electric vehicles, which she has flipped on. But Michelle Lujan Grisham fully supports EV mandates here in New Mexico. And within 2 years from now, she claims, we think, that 43% of the vehicles sold in New Mexico are going to have to be electric. Whether that's realistic or not, or going to happen or not, is a different question. And then we have a huge Medicaid population. We have a lot of folks dependent on welfare. The Legislative Finance Committee says 47% of the state's on welfare. This is the kind of thing that the oil and gas surplus could be used to address. Allegedly, we've had a very strong economy during the Biden-Harris administration. We haven't gotten more of those people to work in any substantive way. thanks in part to Lujan Grisham's policies. So, yes, it's a devastating attack on Michelle Lujan Grisham's track record, but it's meant to highlight that Kamala Harris surrounds herself and embraces doctrinaire, hard left, progressive Democrats, no matter what her policy changes are to her own platform and her own statements in the past.
The title of the editorial that you wrote that you can go to airsofenchantment.com right now and read is called Handing MLG the Mic Should Disqualify Harris for President. So basically, at the convention, you're supposed to bring your best foot forward, your brightest. The future of the party is supposed to come with you, get the primetime positions. But when you look at this record of the state of New Mexico, you know, I mean, it doesn't really correlate. That's not somebody that you should definitely bring up and shiny new governor or shiny new leader for the Democratic Party because our state is last in everything. Is that kind of what your editorial was getting at?
Yeah, basically. And, I think it's a fair chance that if Harris is elected, Michelle Lujan Grisham wants a slot in that administration. And, again, because of her Kamala Harris's unwillingness to outline a coherent, detailed policy statement as to what she wants to do for the country as a whole, we have to kind of judge her based on her own past statements, regardless of whether she's rejected them now or not, and the people who she chooses to surround herself with. And just as a quick aside, Tim Walz, her vice presidential running mate, is in many ways reflective of Michelle Lujan Grisham, and their own track records line up quite nicely or disturbingly, depending on your perspective. But they were both elected in 2018 after being in Congress, and they both enacted very, very left-wing approaches to public policy in their own states. In fact, Walz has his own EV mandate on the books in Minnesota. So again, Kamala Harris suddenly rejecting an EV mandate, and yet her vice presidential running mate and Michelle Lujan Grisham, just two of many, many Democrat politicians, including her current boss and current administration, all pushing EV mandates. It just strikes me as entirely devoid of any substance and reality that that's the way she's going to govern if elected.
Right. She's just telling you what she thinks you want to hear at this moment in time for the general base. Now, tell me a little bit, though, about vice presidential candidate J.D. Vance. We have not spoken since he's been selected or haven't talked about him at all. So I'm just interested in your opinion on him as a vice presidential candidate.
Yeah, well, J.D. Vance and I happen to have kind of grown up in the same general region of the country. He currently lives in Southwest Ohio, the Cincinnati area, which is where I grew up. Very different upbringings, very different cultures, quite frankly, that we were a part of. I've read, though, his Hillbilly Elegy book, which is an excellent read, and it describes some of the challenges of Appalachian families and then moving into Southwest Ohio, and just kind of that whole upbringing and some of the challenges he faced. But he's an incredibly smart guy. I think when Trump picked him, he was under the impression that Biden was still going to finish out his term in office. So that just gives you an idea of how long it's been since we talked. So much has happened. But Vance is in many ways an intellectual heir to President Trump, and also a very smart guy with that Yale degree and all the accomplishments that he's had, including writing that book, which was also turned into a movie. He's not my guy when it comes to things like free trade or rhetoric about free markets and limited government. But we're dealing with a Kamala Harris Walz administration that is the most left-wing ticket we've seen at least since FDR ran, if not further back than that. So we're dealing with what I consider to be an existential threat to the American political system and basic common sense in this country. So uh, I'm willing to ignore maybe things I disagree with JD Vance on, which there are some things.
Right. So it's interesting. You look back on it. My wife was telling me the other day. She's like, "Do you know that the Democrats have been in the White House 12 out of the last 16 years?" Right. There's only one 4-year term, which was hijacked by COVID towards the last months, anyways. Right. That there was a Republican in charge, and they're really painting a narrative that it feels like the Republicans have done everything in every situation that we're living in, when in fact 12 of the last 16 was run by Democrats. It's just like, just think about that for a second, because why does the mainstream make it feel like that's not the case?
The gaslighting in this electoral campaign has been nothing short of amazing, and the media have been, and I call them the corporate media,
Yeah.
or the establishment media. They've been very willing to play along with everything Kamala Harris has said, simply because they dislike Donald Trump and dislike everything that he stands for. And again, I'm telling people left and right, Trump, whether you like the guy or not, I have my areas of disagreement with him. But boy, when Kamala Harris just tries to gaslight people and say things that are simply not true and then change positions, she supported the Green New Deal in Congress as a U.S. senator. And now she's going to take all of these moderate positions on environmental issues like EV mandates. It strikes me that she's just waiting to get elected and then completely change direction and do so in ways that I think could be very, very dangerous for our country.
All right. Well, very much appreciate your comments on that. I did not watch a whole lot of the Democratic National Convention. I didn't watch the Republican one either. So just in my defense, that's why we talked to you, so you could tell us what's happening, because I don't really like watching too much of it. So I thought I read something the other day that said that obviously oil and gas revenue is doing quite well here in the state of New Mexico, but it was slightly down from where it was in a previous year. Is that correct, or do I know what I'm talking about at all?
Again, with the media and their ways of reporting things, it's not entirely accurate. I like to quote Stein's law. It's a real law in economics. Ben Stein, of course, from Ferris Bueller's Day Off. He's well known. Well, Ben Stein, his father, Herb, had a law that was very simple. Things that cannot go on forever won't. Why do I bring this up now? Well, because you can't have such massive growth in the oil and gas industry that you have $3.5 billion budget surpluses every single year into infinity. The reality is that New Mexico's oil and gas industry remains very strong. It is growing. Production is growing. Prices are stable. They're not as elevated as they were, and that is great for us at the pump. $650 million in new money will be available as it stands now to the legislature when they convene in January. It's a very healthy amount of money on top of some really massive budget surpluses in recent years. So, it's not, $3.5 billion, but, again, we've spent that money. We've put that money into the permanent funds. There's been a lot of ways that the budget has grown over the years. And so you're simply not going to have $3.5 billion annual surpluses into perpetuity. And I consider the growth of this industry still very strong. It's just maybe leveling out a little bit. And I remain of the opinion that our governor and the legislature should undertake some tax reform and approaches that could make New Mexico a more diversified, business-friendly state, more attractive to investments from industries, whether it's in the oil and gas industries that aren't in here, like more refineries perhaps, or other non-oil and gas related businesses that could come to New Mexico. if we had a more competitive tax structure, if we reformed the gross receipts tax, if we maybe reduced the income tax or eliminated the income tax, if we got people back in the workforce instead of on Medicaid, that would be how to do this. So, yeah, it's again, you're just not going to have those kinds of surpluses every year on into the future. So, very, very solid numbers, though, from the oil and gas industry. No reason for concern. In fact, it's reason to continue to reduce taxes and make our state more economically friendly. And we have the tools to do it right now.
Right. A record year means exactly that. It's a record, which means it's not the norm. That's what makes it a record, you know? So
Exactly.
that's pretty simple, but thanks for addressing that. I also wanted to ask you, I don't know if you're familiar down here in Carlsbad, but the city council is on the verge of passing a plastic bag ban ordinance.
Oh, goodness.
It was introduced at the city council on the 27th. I attended that meeting. Obviously, heard some public comment. 75% of the public comment, about 20 individuals, were in favor of it. The city council, from what I can tell, probably will end up voting on it and passing it on September 24th. But I know that Albuquerque had their little trials and tribulations with the plastic bag ordinance for a little while, and there seems to be quite a few running around the state. I'm not sure if you're really paying attention to that, but I thought you might have an opinion on that.
Well, I had not seen. Let me take one quick step back. I will address this, but there was an article in the Albuquerque Journal that was done by George Munoz, Senate Finance Committee Chair, and Nathan Small, state rep from Las Cruces, and they were very excited because New Mexico now has $54.7 billion in its sovereign wealth funds. That's again money generated by the oil and gas industry, and quite frankly, the state of New Mexico should not be sitting on that kind of cash. We should be, especially given the significant social challenges that we face with our lagging and poor education system, our lacking workforce participation rate, our lacking and diversified economy. We can and should be using that money not to spend it predominantly, but by reducing taxes and making our state more attractive as a destination for people and investments. On the plastic bag ban, where do I start? I'll just say that a year or so ago, New Jersey, which had enacted such a ban, there was a report done about New Jersey, and they found out that the plastic bag ban actually dramatically increased the amount of plastic in the waste stream, because as people adjusted their habits, the general rule was that so-called reusable plastic bags were replacing the thinner bags, which are considered disposable. I use them for trash can liners and to pick up pet waste, but they are considered disposable. People were disposing of the thicker bags, and that number of those bags, because they are so much heavier and more plastic intensive, actually increased the amount of plastic in the dumps in New Jersey. And then just a month or so ago, the LA Times, now of course California, you think they're the granddaddy of them all when it comes to these kinds of wackadoodle environmental policies. They said the same thing. The Los Angeles Times editorial board said the first round of plastic bag ban passed, I want to say 2014, actually caused plastic waste to increase by 50% in the state of California. So what are they doing? They're not saying, oops, we made a mistake, we'll allow you to use your plastic bags. No, they are coming back in California and banning the thicker bags too. So it'll just be harder and harder to get your groceries from the store into your vehicle or whatever you use to get your car, to get your groceries back home. So that is California-style policy making. I hope Carlsbad residents are smarter than that, and their elected officials are. So I will be sure to engage with that particular issue before the city council meets and finalizes that, because it's incredibly bad policy. So Thanks for alerting me.
Right. So the city council meets the second and fourth Tuesday of every month. And at the city council meetings here in Carlsbad, public comment is at the end of the meeting. It's not at the beginning. I'm not to have an opinion about it, but people that are listening, if you have an opinion, you want to hear your opinion that's heard, then definitely go in and email every city council or email every mayor. But if you'd like to give public comment at a city council meeting before they take a vote, you have to go to the September 10th meeting and speak at the end of that meeting, because on September 24th, they're going to vote it, and then they're going to do public comment. So you have to email your councilor, your mayor now, or go to the September 10th city council meeting in order to have an opinion. Whatever opinion you have, would completely respect. If they have plastic bags, Paul, I'm using them. If they don't, then I hope my wife remembered the reusable ones. You know what I mean? Otherwise, I'm just going to carry them out. And all the plastic that they come wrapped in already, you know?
Yeah, exactly. This is truly a case of government policy looking for a problem that doesn't exist and then worsening the outcomes by imposing a harmful policy that actually increases the problem they say they're trying to fight against. And of course, what you often get from the environmental advocates at these meetings is that large numbers of these bags wind up in our oceans and polluting our waterways, which we don't really have many waterways here in New Mexico to begin with. But if you look at where plastic pollution comes from that does make its way to the oceans, I believe 10 out of 10 of the waterways were in Asia, maybe one of them in South America. But this is a real problem in Asian nations where they just don't have the same level of environmental stewardship about litter and keeping plastic and other things out of the waterways. So again, thanks for alerting me. I'll be pinning an op-ed here to appear in the Carlsbad newspaper very shortly.
I look forward to reading it, Paul. If it's anything like your Albuquerque Journal editorial recently, then it should be very entertaining. And it's worth always going to errorsofenchantment.com, because that's where anything that you write is published there, even the ones that don't get picked up by editorial boards. Running a little short on time, a little bit tight, Paul. I want to go ahead and thank you again for coming on, but I also want you to close. Go ahead and we'll get together next month. We'll have you on again, but go ahead and close this episode or this interview with us, whatever you want to talk about.
Yeah, well, obviously we need to do our best to fact check what's going on in this campaign for the presidency and the legislature. And that's a big chunk of what we do at the Rio Grande Foundation. I was recently in Phoenix last week, got to meet with former Governor Doug Ducey out there and talk about what Arizona's done well, even in the absence of oil and gas, that has made that area. And again, I was there. It was 110. It was hot as heck, and especially for me here in Albuquerque, it's considerably hotter down there. But that city, that state is booming, while New Mexico continues to flail and see poor outcomes. And we need the voters to be involved, to be aware of the issues that not just at the federal level, but at the state level in these legislative races, and of course at the local level, even, where we try to keep track of what's going on in cities and local governments across the entire state, and don't always succeed in that. But thanks to connections like you here in Carlsbad, we're able to get a beat on what's going on in some areas where you think Carlsbad's going to always be doing the right thing. They're limited government folks, conservative, and then whammo, they're trying a harmful plastic bag ban. So just keep it on top of everything in this crazy, crazy election season. Follow errorsofenchantment.com, and you'll be on top of it here in New Mexico.
All right, Paul Gessing, president of the Rio Grande Foundation. Thanks again, sir.
Thank you, Johnny. Appreciate it.
You're listening to Community Forum on KCCC 930 AM, sponsored by Eddy County, honoring God, country, and family, thriving with industry since 1889.